This will begin the lecture for Chapter 20 on weather. In Chapter 20, we're going to look at Section 1, air masses and weather. Section 2 will be fronts and lows. Section 3, thunderstorms and tornadoes. 4, hurricanes and winter storms. And then a little bit in Section 5 on forecasting the weather. We begin in Section 1 with air masses and weather. And meteorology, which is the study of weather. And the study of weather, meteorology, is a process that governs Earth's atmosphere, and it helps make weather predictions possible. First thing we're going to look at is the origin of an air mass. And an air mass is a large body of air in the lower troposphere that has similar characteristics throughout it. And as it says, sometimes they can be pretty big. The graphic on the right illustrates a maritime polar air mass that would advance on the east coast of the United States. And as you can see, it can be quite big. Temperature and humidity is dependent on where the air mass comes from. And you all can refer to the graphic in Chapter 20, Section 1, to help you out with the different types of air masses and their origins. And I've included that graphic here. The types of air masses. Number one, we're going to look at maritime polar. Maritime polar, as it implies, maritime coming from the sea. This is where a lot of our weather comes from, the United States, off the west coast of the United States, through like we call it the Washington, Oregon corridor out of Seattle, and comes into the United States, gets picked up by the jet stream, comes in from here, gets picked up by the jet stream, and is carried across Wisconsin and then out through upstate New York. Maritime polar. Continental Arctic, especially in our winters. Occasionally in the summer when we get a bad cold snap, a cold front comes down, continental Arctic can come down and influence our weather, making it a lot colder in northern Wisconsin. Maritime tropical, when you see weather that it rains a lot in like LA, when they do get rain. Maritime tropical from the Pacific and into the coast of California. Continental tropic, this brings like the moisture and the warm air in the summers into areas like Las Vegas possibly. Continental tropic can also bring in from the Mexican peninsula, can bring in that dry air that causes a lot of drought in the Texas area. And maritime tropical, this is the weather that we like to see in northern Wisconsin. From the Gulf, that warm moist air is brought up into Wisconsin from the south or the southwest, and typically makes our summers or springs pretty nice. Continental Arctic is very cold and dry, and it originates in an Arctic region. Continental polar, again, cold and dry, can produce some precipitation and originates inland in Alaska and Canada. Air masses moving across North America, again, they're the standard ones, the maritime polar, continental Arctic, continental polar, maritime tropic, continental tropic, maritime tropic, and maritime polar. Maritime polar is characterized by being cold and damp and originates over the ocean in high latitudes. Maritime tropical is warm and moist, and like I said, this is what we like in northern Wisconsin, when those warm, moist southern breezes, sometimes it can be too humid, come up from the Gulf and work their way up into northern Wisconsin. Continental tropic, typically characterized by being hot and dry. It originates over the deserts in Mexico, and it can cause the droughts that we experience in the southwest in Texas, Oklahoma, and in New Mexico. Here's that graphic one more time for you, blown up. again, continental Arctic. And I will on a test ask you, what is characterized by a continental Arctic air mass, maritime polar, for example, and etc. Okay, we're done with the Section 1 lecture, and here are your 5 review questions on a separate document, and I will post this in My Big Campus. I would suggest opening up a Word document, or you can cut and paste these questions to the assignment block on your My Big Campus site and with your answers, and then submit your answers for these 5 questions. And this will conclude the lecture notes for Chapter 20, Section 1.